Welcome to the Kim B. Davis Show. Here we'll talk to the leaders in technology, culture, business, and the arts. We'll cover politics, advocacy, motherhood, writing, mental health, and mostly we'll focus on hope. Join Kim B. Davis, author, playwright, radio personality, event consultant, professional speaker on the Kim B. Davis Show. Good evening. This is the Kim B. Davis Show, and I'm your host, Kim B. Davis. Thank you for joining us again this evening. Tonight, we have author April Thomas. She is an author of 17 books, with one coming. She's launching a magazine and probably doing something else that I have neglected to mention. Good evening, April. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, tonight, I want to talk about your works. And there was something about your first book, Endurance, that seemed spiritual to me. So, 2020, when we rang in the new year, I'm sure, and maybe you're a mind reader, maybe you're a psychic, maybe you knew this was coming. I did not. And so here we are trying to figure out how to navigate another shutdown. We've had all types of political unrest. We witnessed the deaths, because I cannot stop saying their names: George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. We've lost 164 people to police violence. We've lost 200,000 people to COVID. And we're in the beginnings of another shutdown. And it just seems like that there was a spiritual battle going on this year. And when I say spiritual, not that everything that happened necessarily was spiritual, but in the spiritual realm where you have good versus evil, it felt like that. And for everybody that experienced, sheltering in place, my thought was, okay, I am at home. What am I supposed to learn from this journey? So tell me, did you learn anything about yourself this year during this journey? And did it feel like a spiritual awakening?
Yes, I've learned a lot through 2020 and this lockdown. I learned a lot about being at home with your family and how to not kill each other, how to how to survive your own family during a lockdown. Staying on the positive side, learning new ways to make money. Like, we have to change the way we think and how to bring finances into the home. And we have so many God-given talents that we don't use because we're busy doing a job. Now it's a time for us to actually look into what the talents that we have. So I learned a lot, and I can't stop creating new stuff because I'm like, wow, what didn't I think about this years ago? Well, I wasn't locked down. I was too busy trying to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, would you say that this year feels like it was a spiritual awakening?
Yes.
Okay.
I felt like it's been coming, and there were things that I went through personally in my life where I feel like God actually prepared me for this year. So for me, this year, it was horrible, but it's like I was trained for it. So
Mm-hmm.
when it happened, I already knew what to do because for me, I've been doing it, before. So it did help me. Um, it's still it's still rough. It's still rough, but it helps me a lot. I was somewhat prepared, so that was a good thing.
And I'm sure, and for a lot of us who we may have felt prepared, that once we started to reflect back on some of those things in life where God has brought you from, and you're like, okay, God,
Yeah,
I
I
can
got this.
survive
Yes,
this too. It took
yeah,
us a minute to get there.
yes,
So you write a lot about spiritualism, it seems like, in your books. You
yes.
write a lot about tragic circumstances where people are fighting for good and evil. Is
Hmm.
that something that inspires you? or is that something that is born out of tragedy or a sad time or a place in your life?
I would say it's both. Um, when I'm compelled to write about things in a spiritual nature, I've always been I've always been attracted to trying to understand why things happen.
Okay.
Like I will be the person to sit in detail in my mind, break down the event and all the people involved in the event and try to understand how it came to this point. And it helps with writing because when you write all these different characters, you can even see the villain's point of view for why they do the things they do. Sometimes they don't really have a good reason, but for them, it's a good reason. So um, for me, I've always, I think, I don't know if it's because I was an only child growing up,
Mhm.
so I didn't have a lot of friends. So I had imaginary friends, which probably, I mean, when I was younger, that's what he had. so,
Mhm.
and I was left to kind of play by myself a lot until my cousin was born, and then he was like years younger than me. So, I had imaginary friends where to me that it was who I had to talk to as a child, and I prayed a lot as a child. I used to go behind my grandfather's couch and or his armchair and pray. That's where I would go to talk to God, and all that kind of came to a head as I grew up. That there's so much more to life than just what we see, and I feel like having that relationship with God, not even anybody forcing me or just it was a natural because I didn't have no one else to talk to. That I ended up um it saved my life in a lot of ways. There's times when I've could have died millions of times, just different ways. And because of that still voice that you hear in your from your heart, that saved me, maybe going left instead of going right, and yeah, I feel like I took those experiences and I put it in my book in different characters in different ways. So
Wow. So you're not crazy because I had an invisible friend when I was little. My brother had one as well. And my grandmother gave me
oh
a
good,
great piece of advice.
good.
She said, "You're not crazy if you
hmm
have someone that you talk to or you talk to yourself. You just don't answer yourself back. Now, if you answer yourself back, then they have to take you away. But as long as you don't answer yourself, you're good."
yes.
I have always lived by that. But I want to go back to something that you said. Did I hear you correctly? You said no one really
hmm
had introduced you to God per se, but you knew enough to get behind the armchair to talk to him.
Yes. I get well. My grandmother, she was a praying grandma, so
Okay.
she was a praying mom, praying grandma. So and she would. This is a woman who would sit down on the floor and read the Bible every single day. I don't even do that. She reads the Bible every single day, and she was my grandmother was kind of rough. She loves you. She loves you hard, and she loves you rough. That's just how she was.
Hmm.
And but I don't I can't say there was one specific person in my life that was like, April, you need to go pray, you need to go do this, as a child that kept that. It was just I always felt like a closeness to God as a child, even as a child.
Okay.
And for me, it was through my imaginary friends because and it's very strange, but it was through them.
I
So
would call those your
yeah,
angels.
I did.
I will call those your angels.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
other people have similar stories to that where they would say,
Yeah.
and I'll give you an example. The artist Prince said that he had epilepsy as a child. And he said an angel came to him and told him that he wasn't going to have seizures anymore. And he couldn't explain it, but he knew it was an angel. And so I think,
Yeah.
children are innocent and see things. And when my children were very little, like in the crib, and they would wake up, they would
hmm
and I would be like, who are they talking to? Because it's nobody in the room, but it would seem like they were having a whole conversation with
Conversation.
somebody.
Yep. Yep.
And,
Yep.
I had to think about it, say, you know what? Maybe it's their grandparents coming to see them. I know people don't like to talk
hmm
about things
Yep.
like that, but there were just certain
Yeah.
things that I couldn't explain. Like I could be in the room and we could have fallen asleep, and I would wake up and immediately think of a grandparent, and it would just be something out of the blue. So, you know,
Wow.
I understand that. So that's why I wanted to bring that out, because that is powerful. That means God has his hands on
Mhm.
your life.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have 17 books and an
Yeah.
18th coming. How do you do that?
Yes.
Tell us.
I don't know. When I wrote when I wrote my first book, Endurance, I started writing in middle school, but it was just for fun, and it was like in little notebooks. I had me and my friend. She would write her stories, and we would exchange stories, and that was our entertainment for us. And I started out with the same characters, just not now. The story is completely. I wouldn't say completely different. Yeah, it's completely different. It's an adult version now. Back then I didn't know nothing. I was innocent. So the stories didn't really they were very innocent. They were two runaway kids back then, and they had really retarded names, stupid names. Their names was Med and Mycelia.
Oh,
Me-
wow.
Yeah, Med was because I had a number two pencil. You know how it says Med?
Uh-huh.
And I was in science class when I started, and we were learning about fungus. So
Yes,
I
I
really like the
remember.
name Mycelia.
So you named the character. So listen, guys, you can name a character whatever you want.
Whatever you want.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So when I didn't re I just started writing again when I think I was in my 30s.
Mhm.
So I started writing like let's say 11, 12. And then I stopped when I was 14. And then I didn't pick it up again until I was in like in my mid 30s, maybe 32, 33.
Mhm.
And it changed my life because when I when I my sister kept telling me, you should write a book, you should write a book. And I was like, yeah, maybe. I didn't know if I could have the attention span. You know, that's why I could relate when people said, how do you focus to write? I can't I didn't have the attention span to sit there that long and write. But my sister kept pushing me. So I said, all right, let me try this. I sat down at my computer and I probably only wrote a paragraph. And all the emotions came up and they were so intense, I almost threw up on my keyboard. So I
Wow.
ran and I was like hot sweats. I was dripping. I'm the type of person I don't really sweat. I was dripping sweat. I was hot, like I had hot and cold flashes. And I ran from the computer, almost fell, and because I almost threw up on my computer. Like it was a whole dramatic scene. And then I didn't try attempt writing again for 2 months.
Really?
Yeah, it was that intense for me. Like, and if the story I was writing was about a woman who was in an abusive relationship and
Mm.
she's trying to sneak her kids out of the house so that, and then later she would escape, you know?
Mhm.
I didn't actually write that story till my fourth book, which is really funny. But after that experience, after 2 months, I kept having dreams. I kept having this, it was like in my chest, like
Mhm.
it was this, I was compelled to write.
Mhm.
And I had a dream, since we're going to talk about dreams.
Yes.
I did have a dream. And in the dream, you know, I was spoken to, I don't know, let's just say a guide, my imaginary friends, angels, whoever you want to say. But they told me to write this book, just write. They didn't even tell me exactly what to write, just write. Like the story will come to you, just write. And they said, yes, your life is should get easier. Life is going to get harder, but if you stick to it, it'll be worth it. And I said, eh, I tried to ignore it for a while because I was living a good, comfortable life. I was married. I didn't have to work. My husband made good money. I didn't have to worry about anything. He would bring me home Coach bags. I had a good life, no problem. And but I was home, you know, the kids would go to school, he goes to work, and I'm just there twiddling my thumbs. Either I would make jewelry, I'm always making something. But
Mhm.
it's like it got to the point where it's like I would go to sleep at night and my hand would start doing this in my sleep. Like I wake up, my hand's doing this. And I'm like, this is not normal. So one morning I just couldn't take it anymore. I got up and I got a pen and a paper and I started writing. and I didn't know what to write. I said, I'm going to go back to the story I wrote when I was in middle school. And next thing I knew, I was like, I would be writing all day. I was writing 10,000 words a day. For someone who can't focus, I was writing 10,000 words a day. It took me 2 weeks to write over 100,000 words.
Mm.
And I completed that book. And then I was like, okay, well, I got that out. And I told my husband at the time about it, and he wasn't happy about it.
Mm.
He was like, oh, the I'm thinking like, okay, well, I did this. This is great. You never know. We could get it all fixed up and send it off, get it published. It'll be something that for us. He wasn't happy about it. He didn't support it. He didn't support it, and just to spare us a long story because it's another book.
Okay.
But he didn't support it to the point where our marriage ended violently because
Wow.
of this book. Yeah,
Really?
yeah. Our marriage, from the time I wrote the book to the time of our marriage ended, it was, I want to say, under a year.
Mm.
And by that time, I was working on my third book because through all that, I was still writing.
Mm-hmm.
It turned into my escape from everything that we were dealing with in the marriage and in the household. I would just write. That's how I got away, escaped it mentally. So I was halfway through my third book before the marriage like really really ended. And when it ended horribly. It was just a horrible horrible experience. And I always remember back to that dream I had where they said your life will get harder. And that was just the beginning.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a whole nother, it'll take us all day to talk about it. But it was a life-changing experience for me. Do I regret it? No, I don't regret it.
Okay.
And I'm now coming out of a lot of things with it. It's now starting to get better, but that book Endurance is significant for me personally because of what I went through just giving birth to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so I want to ask you one question.
Mhm.
Do you think that the book brought out things you were ignoring because you did have such a good life? Your husband brought you Coach bags. You didn't have to worry about anything. The kids went to school. Life was good.
Mhm. It opened my eyes to things that were already there. There were things already there, but it was like I could either the one that really pushed me over the dream that there was I had a couple of dreams. The last dream that really pushed me over the edge was I had a dream I was like in my 80s and I was in my bed and I was dying and I was looking back on my life and I started to cry and I
Mhm,
felt like there's such gloom and depression because when I looked back on my life, I hadn't really accomplished anything. I
mhm.
never challenged myself to do anything. I never set out to do anything. I was a wife, a mom, and that was it. And there's nothing wrong with being a wife and a mom,
Mhm.
but everybody has a dream. So it's like I never pursued my dream. I never set out to do what I felt God sent me to do. And the depression that I felt in that dream, like it could kill you. The depression alone was that sad. It was that intense. And that was just a dream. So after that dream is when I said, okay, enough's enough. I don't care.
Wow.
I'm gonna do this. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
interesting enough, I also want to go back to something you said. You wrote as a child and you wrote
Mhm.
very innocent stories, and you had two characters named Med and Mycelium, which I think is awesome
Yeah.
and cool. Did,
Yeah.
how young were you, do you believe, when you first started writing?
11. 11.
Okay, 11 when it
Yeah.
started. And you
Yeah.
wrote you were about 14.
Yeah. Yeah. I started early. Um I started real early. Just I would do poems.
Okay.
And then the poems were I think were like in my 5th grade year. And
Mhm.
then when I hit the 6th grade, I had a friend who she wrote stories about lawyers
Mm,
and that was her yeah, she loved law. She loved like back then was LA law.
yes.
So she loved stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And she was like, why don't we write in books? I was like, that is so weird and boring sounding, but I don't know why I did it. But I did it, and I don't regret it. I would go into my own little world and just write.
That's amazing. So what made you stop? What do you think made you stop at that time?
I realized that my stories started sounding the same. Even though I try to write a different story, a different book, all my characters started to sound the same. All of the storylines sounded the same. I didn't have, and it's like it hit me one day. It's like if someone said, "You don't have any life experience. You're only 14." You know, I wanted to write about things I knew nothing about. I wanted to get deeper into romance and relationships, but I didn't know nothing about romance relationships. So I put it down and I started high school. And that was, I got enough information.
Yes, you did, I'm sure.
Yes.
And the
Yeah.
reason that I brought that up is because I was a writer as a kid as well. And my girlfriends
Hmm.
and I, we had this thing, we would play Barbies and then we would write a story. And then we would take our Barbies and reenact the story that we had just written. And I never thought that I was
Oh,
that good because my girlfriend across the street was the superior writer. She went off to
yeah.
LA and did some wonderful things.
Wow.
But for me, I didn't start back writing until 9/11 happened. And it was
Oh,
very similar to what you were saying about your dream where you look back on your life. And I had
yeah.
a moment and I was like, God, because it was a whole situation. And I was in Detroit. I was in a very tall building across from what we call the Renaissance Center. And GM had just moved into that building and they thought that planes were coming there to bomb it. And our
Oh,
executive director would not let us go. He said, "Well, we're going to set an example for the terrorists." Yes, he said that. Anyway, oh
wow.
yeah, it was crazy. Like we couldn't go. We were sitting there. People were looking out the windows, crying, waiting for a plane to come. It was a very emotional day, and I just remember thinking, God, if you bless me to get through this day, whatever I'm supposed to do, I'll do
Hmm.
it. My father
Yeah.
was an attorney. I was running from law school. I did not want to do law school. Law school was not for me. And I was like, if you want me to be a lawyer, I'll be a lawyer. But if it's something else that I'm supposed to do, tell me. Because right now I make more than my age. As people say, you make your age. I made more than my age. I had
Hmm.
a little title. I was doing things that other people that I knew were not doing, but I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And literally a few weeks later, same thing. It was a dream came to me.
Hmm.
And it was this idea for a book and it wouldn't leave me like it was all the time. And when I finally realized that that's what I was supposed to do, it was the same thing. I was literally writing just like I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
So I understand that feeling. And I would always say it's like in a horror movie, like you
Yeah.
have to write. And you're like, I can't stop.
Yes.
And I wrote it all
Exactly.
out by hand and then
Yes.
later transferred it to a computer and was like, okay, we're not doing that again. We will just type
Mhm.
it on a
That's
computer.
right. Yeah, yeah. After I went through that notebook, I'm like, why am I writing in a notebook?
Yes. So
Yeah.
you were like, I'm not going to torture myself. So tell
Hmm.
me, out of your 17 books, and I'll even include the one that's coming soon. So
Hmm.
18 books. What is your favorite book and why?
Ooh, that is a tough one. It's easy to tell you which one's not my favorite, but
And it's not that you don't like it, but there's just, we all sort of have a book that we love just because, like, for me, it's my romance fictional trilogy. So,
trilogy.
yes.
It is like Endurance is a series, and it
Mhm.
has 7 books in the series right now.
Okay.
That has to, honestly, that has to be because all the other books are spinned off of that series.
Mhm.
So it would have to go back to Endurance or the Endurance series. Yeah, those I love the characters. I love there's so many scenes that um in those books the characters actually speak to angels. So in the books they have the four archangels,
Okay.
and they'll come down and they speak with the people and they kind of help guide them and whatever. But it's just the storyline, the things that happen. There's a lot of things happening. One thing I hate is being bored in a book. So
Mhm.
I throw monkey wrenches in there. I throw a lot of twists and turns in there. There's some that even surprised me. So I didn't see that coming. But so it would have to be endurance because it was fun to even write. It was a lot of fun writing it also.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
yeah.
So I'm gonna ask you a question, and don't laugh
Uh-huh.
at me if you don't do
Okay.
this. Do you hear your
Okay.
characters talking in your head? Like I tell people that they look at me sideways. I'm like, I'm not crazy. I
That's what
can
makes a good writer.
yeah. I see it as a movie. Is that something that you see or do
Yeah.
as well? Okay.
Yes. I
Okay.
feel like a fly on a wall with a pen and a paper trying to write down
Yeah.
everything everybody's seen in a room. That's how I feel when I'm writing. 'Cause so they'll talk back and forth, and I'm like,
What? I know, like, who
really?
wait, let me get that down. Yes. It's like when you have a plan for a character and I don't know if you do outlining. I do that somewhat. But a lot of times I let my characters tell me where they are supposed to go. And my character,
Yeah.
I'll be trying to write something and it just won't work out. And my character be like, because I'm not going that way. And I'm like, but I'm the boss
Yeah.
here. What why do you
Yeah.
right?
No, I've understood that I'm just a pen. I'm
Yes,
just a tool. It's their story.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Okay, so
Every time, sorry.
oh no, no, finish your statement.
Every time I've tried to do an outline or set a way that I want the story to go, it never happens. It never happens. So yeah, I gave up on
So
it.
I don't feel so bad.
No.
So now I want to talk about your magazine. How much can you tell us about this wonderful piece of work that you're going to put out that's launching soon? I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, thank you. So it started off with actually my business partner. It was kind of the magazine wasn't his idea. The name Pandem was his idea to create something that has to do with helping people, you know, cope through what's going on now with the 2020 pandemic and everything.
Yes.
And it then my idea was, okay, well, he wants to do kind of like an app or something like that, and I came up with the idea. Let's start with a magazine first,
Mm-hmm.
and let's get some people together who are that has something related to this pandemic and what they learned. So whether they started their business during the pandemic, whether they survived COVID, or if they lost somebody through COVID, um, just their tips for being stuck in the house with their family,
Mm-hmm.
and not being able to the kids to really get out like they're used to, or now they're teachers slash moms slash wives slash everything else.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah, so we get that all together and put it under one magazine, and maybe just it'll kind of help other people that are going through it that can relate to it, like, oh well, I didn't think about doing that with my kids, or I didn't think about looking at things from different perspectives. So that was the whole concept behind the magazine. So we're hoping that it can really help a lot of people, business wise, and also just everybody. If I could share some tips about how we didn't choke each other out and during the house, I think I've succeeded.
That is something that is very needed because unfortunately the reality is there are a lot of people that are getting divorced because they
Yeah,
can't deal in this pandemic.
that's
A
sad.
lot of people, it is very sad. A lot of people are struggling because of that. So all
Yeah,
of that you're talking about is very much needed. So I'm
yeah,
excited to see that.
yeah. That's,
So a couple more questions before
mhm.
because our time is quickly passing us.
Yes.
What are you most proud of as an author?
What am I most proud of? I would say these 18 books. Well, 17 and counting.
Very
I
good.
would, yeah, I would, they're like my little kids. So, you know, um, I'm happy that I didn't just let the opportunity pass me by or say, no, God, I can't do this. It's too much for me.
Hmm.
I faced it and I knew absolutely nothing about publishing, and I made all the mistakes you could possibly make, but I learned from them, because I do believe you learn more from losing than
Yeah.
winning. So I lost a lot. I lost a lot, but I learned a lot, and it helped develop skills in me that I didn't know I had. I didn't know I could design book covers. I didn't know I could do book formatting. I didn't know I could even learn how to do those things. I didn't know, So, but I learned a lot of things. And for me, what it led to is because of the things that happened in my life, as a teenager, I had a child young, and I used to be a cutter because I had gotten sexually abused. So all of these things, it caused me where I didn't finish high school. I was I had a lot of issues,
Hmm.
and I've been beaten down a lot, So now, because I have these books, it's opened up so many doors for me, and it really showed me that I could do a lot of things that I didn't think I could do. So at 43, April got her GED and went back to college, or went to college. Yeah.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So, I mean, like, and that was because of these books, because I didn't give up on my books. I wrote,
Mhm.
so that's
Awesome.
fun.
So
Mhm.
it's funny how God works because this last question I wanted to
Mhm.
ask you specifically. So you talked about how when you birthed your book, your marriage fell apart. You talked
Yes.
about how, as a teenager, you were a cutter. You talked about,
Uh,
do we need to take a break? You need to,
Um, just uh just real one quick 1 second. Hold
okay.
on, sorry.
So I wanted to ask you, having gone through some of the tragic things that you've gone through, and as you said, been beaten down and pushed down, for people, especially women that are struggling today during this pandemic, who are facing anxiety, who are facing depression, who may be cutting, who may be thinking of suicide, or who just may feel like I'm all alone and this is all that life has to offer, what advice would you offer them to help lift them up?
Don't give up. No matter what, do not give up. Your victory is right around the corner. No matter what happens, just don't give up. Keep praying and believing in God, because it's this is not the end for you. It's only the beginning. Sometimes God may set you back to spring you forward, and it's okay. You can do this.
Awesome. Thank you, April. Tell us where we
Thank
can find,
you.
how we can order your books, how we can find out about your magazine.
You could go to my website, aprilathomas.com, and you can find me on Facebook at author April Thomas. And yeah, that's about it. And my
Okay.
website is probably the best place to get me.
Okay, tell us your website again.
Okay. I would say aprilathomas.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, April Thomas, for being on
Thank you.
us. I hope that you will join us again when your next book comes out so we can talk about it. Thank you guys. You have been watching the Kim B. Davis Show. I hope that you'll tune in for our next episode. And as always, remember, be magnificent.